Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. I'm extremely delighted to be here, to be able to moderate this session, which is a very unenviable job, to be able to stop these eminent speakers after 7 minutes. And those who have been accustomed to listening to such panel discussions know that it's not easy for a speaker to, by the time he warms up, he has to wind up. So warming up and winding up happening simultaneously is a very difficult thing. So I have my friend here with a bell and a clock. So he will assist me. At the end of 6 minutes, there will be a warning bell, which means we have only 60 more seconds, 59 plus 1 seconds to go. And in this context, I was just remembering an interesting incident which I'll share with you, talking about the time. Some years ago, I was in Bangkok attending a conference of the World Universities Vice Chancellors meet. They call them presidents in the United States. The Chancellor of the Oxford University was present at the inauguration. He was a very witty, extremely knowledgeable person. He began by saying the following: I went to an international conference and asked the audience, how long should I speak? In one voice they said, sir, you come from so far away, only for our sake. You're so knowledgeable. Please do speak as long as you like and as long as you can. But we are leaving after half an hour. So that's a very bad thing for a speaker to happen. So I request all the panelists to confine to their time of 6 plus 1 minutes. As you know, the discussion will be mainly focused upon how each one of these panelists have taken one or more ideas of Swami Vivekananda, applied them in their lives, and how they have been able to make a difference to themselves and to society based upon this idea. So this is the Vivekananda applied, as Swamiji called it, the practical Vedanta. Swamiji said, the dry Advaita has to become living, poetic in everyday life. If our lives are not transformed, then ideas really don't matter at all. So each one of these panelists have been able to apply Swami Vivekananda's ideas in their individual lives, and they have been able to make a difference to the lives of so many. So I first request our Kunalda to go first.
Namaskar, respected Swamiji, my young friends, members in the audience. It just so happens, it's a pure phenomenon of temporal coincidence that last evening we performed the first coronary bypass surgery to be conducted in any of the Ramakrishna Mission hospitals. That was done last evening. And with that, with a lot of effort from all our monks of Calcutta and in the All India scale, I think that has heralded a new beginning in the healthcare in which the Ramakrishna Mission hospitals have been a very prominent player in our country. Now we stand in front of the, I don't know what you call it, the standee, the cutout of a person who had about 13 diseases listed in his death certificate, a diabetic from the age of 17, and who on his return, on his second return to this country, denied in spite of a lot of pushing by his brothers and fellow monks. He refused to see renowned physicians because remember in 1900s there was no cure for diabetes. Insulin was kind of discovered 3 years after Swamiji died. So there were some very primordial notions about the treatment of diabetes, protein diet, etc. And this man refused to consult a doctor on the grounds that 4 rupees per visit he could save and contribute that towards the building fund of Belur Math. And it was his great, kind of embarrassment that being a young diabetic, he had to rush to the loo in every sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. And in the last days of his life, in one of his communications from Shillong, he's writing to his monk brothers that, look, I'm actually getting better because I'm not rushing to the loo as often. And that is because, unknown to himself, he was slipping into terminal renal failure. So from those days of the late 1800s, healthcare in India has not really changed a wee bit. We still remain in a society which at one time was colonially opportunistic and now is capitalistically independent. And in this kind of society, we still have about 75% of the population who does not even have an access to primary health care. So in terms of applying the misfortunes of a young individual who, enlightening us, had to sacrifice his life to diseases at the age of 39 years. As members of this independent nation, we do not hold our heads in any kind of recognition or feat as far as population healthcare is concerned. And in fact, 23rd of December 2013 was an epochal year when another character, unfortunately, who shared the first name that Swamiji had before he became a monk, was the first major prime minister of a major country who cut the population allotment to healthcare for the first time post-Second World War. We hung our heads in shame. So that worries that how we have been unable to transform the values and the experiences in a matter of this time. A few things worries me. About the time Swamiji was born, an author somewhere tucked in a southeast corner of England had written, "We live in the best of times and we live in the worst of times." And that was his beginning to his novel called The Tale of Two Cities. And Charles Dickens did not really think of present India when he wrote those lines, because he did not have a clue that the post-Vivekananda India would be split between the content of Vivekananda and between the branding of Vivekananda, which is a very worrying phenomenon of today. I am tremendously worried the way Vivekananda is being applied in today's societies, because if this poor man's picture is branded in front of those ruts and etc., which is ferrying through the squalid lanes of Uttar Pradesh with the manifesto that they share in an unashamed kind of way, then I think more and more of his ethos and more of his message risks to get lost. So the branding of Vivekananda, to which misconception no less a person than the first prime minister of this independent country succumbed to, stands to outshine the message of service, the message of selflessness, the message of plurality of religion, the message of realization of self as he conceived and echoed through the teachings of Vedanta, need not be submerged in the muscular version of religion that we are sort of sporting as an identity tag of nationalism. It is a misfortune of Bengal that the two single most important messages of Bengal Renaissance, who lived between 4 kilometers of one another, one made a tremendous effort to delink nationalism from humanism, and the other made a tremendous effort to separate humanism from ritualistic religion. But like the same tragedy of the Italian Renaissance, that Michelangelo and Da Vinci, though their lives kind of juxtaposed for about 2 decades, they hardly communicated to one another. These two beacons of primary human thought from this part of the country barely have any recorded interchange or communication as far as the civilized history of India is concerned. And I would remain not entirely surprised that the generation on that front is not head over heels in today's matters, and that is simply because those chaps, they differentiate between hagiography and analysis. To appeal to them, we need analysis, we need facts, we need scholarly deliberations on lives and thoughts. and mere chanting of hymns from the closed rocks of some Thula Mandir is not going to convert that part of the audience to this part of deliberations. Thank you, Maharaj. I've been a bit of a devil's advocate, but my profession and my brain forces me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar, for your outspokenness, which was one of the hallmarks of Swami Vivekananda. In fact, Vivekananda once said to Nivedita, you know, in the West when I spoke, I have emptied halls. People used to be so frustrated, people left, but he went on and on. So we should be very frank, merciless in our analysis of things so that we can improve. It is not to criticize, but to know what's happening. So Dr. Sarkar's deliberation was absolutely precise. I was reminded of Dr. Radhakrishnan's accent when I listened to you. You had a very strong influence of Radhakrishnan upon you. So thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar. Now here goes Professor Mukherjee. And you know, those who have been in the teaching line, as I have been teaching for decades, once they get the mic, it's not easy for them to stop. But I hope that Professor Mukherjee will definitely confine to his time. 6+1, Professor Mukherjee.
Pranam Maharaj, and pranam to all of you. As rightly said, once we get the mic, we don't give it up, but given the condition of my voice, I'll do it very fast. My introduction to Vivekananda comes rather late in life, because the initial years of my life were in a boarding school, and that too in a Christian outfit. And I had to treat whatever I learned in chapel and try to relate to what my mother and my parents used to do. Whenever I came to town, I had to go to Belur Math with my parents and witness discourses with the then president. And I used to try to figure out how does that make sense with what I'm learning in school. Two of the things that I heard in school, and that's from the Bible. Treat your neighbors as if they are your own. It took me time to realize. And I said to myself, why should I do that? What are strangers to me? And then in school we were told, if you're righteous, if you're good, then God will take care of you. Even back home, we were told of the karmic retribution, that if you're not good, whether you're a Jain or a Buddhist or a Hindu, you will have to go through rebirth and pay penance for what you've not done. This didn't appeal to me, because for me, life was here, and what we do here must make sense. So again I questioned, why should I be good? Why should I be moral? Why should I be doing things which might lead me to the next life and I wouldn't know whether it's good or bad? And then came Father Kennedy, who once asked me and asked us, tell me what is the fastest form of communication? And while we were scratching our head, and I'm sure many of you will, I thought of television, radio, etc. He gave the answer. The fastest form of communication is spreading a rumor. It took me years later to find my answers to these questions from reading of Vivekananda. He is the one who told me you should love your neighbor as you love yourself, because in the process you love yourself. The neighbor and you have something in common that we seldom realize, is the same soul. The supreme soul lying within us. Not easy to understand, but somewhat difficult to apply in life. The next stage on freeing the mind, Aristotle was talking about freeing the mind, and ultimately Vivekananda sounds the same board, and he says ultimately it is reflection, reflexivity, the inward journey, the inward inner sciences that help you realize that your freedom lies in discovery of yourself. And it never made sense to me to have the sense of fear that let's be good because otherwise we get retribution, karmic, or hell. Vivekananda told me there is no hell. And only in the management books we realized through the works of Abraham Maslow, you go up the rungs of the ladder. The first stage, physiological needs. And then you go on to safety needs, economic needs, self-esteem, self-actualization. And here was Vivekananda saying, there are no sinners. It's manifestation of self where you realize because of your ignorance, that's yourself. But when you realize that life is impermanent and the only certainty in life is death, then prepare yourself to deliver others from that death. In USA, they ask this question in many B schools. Write your obituary. And I think that should be the talisman for every student, every person here. When you leave this world, how would you like to be known and remembered? Is it a story of just aggrandizement, eating, living, enjoying, dil mange more, amake amar moto thakte dao? Or is it going to be a story where it say, I left this impression as an example for others to follow? I'm fortunate to have parents who had brought up with me their own brother who had lost his mother and father. He was an orphan at the age of 4. And he was brought up with me as a brother. And in fact, he got the better goodies than me. And I used to feel deprived and say, why he and not me? Why didn't I share? And then I got a chance to help them also put to rest. We were blessed with a physically challenged child. And to put my parents' mind at ease, I said, I'll take care of her. I will not take a foreign career. I'll devote myself to India, to my family, to my home, to my nation. I wonder why people with the best of posts, and one of my dear friends is now executive director of the World Bank, I asked him in Cornell, in a poor country like ours, what more can you get than a professorship in Delhi School of Economics? A center of excellence to pursue development? Why should you go and settle abroad? Do we realize the debt we have to our nation? I think the whole thing comes from Swami Vivekananda's idea of dynamic morality, practice, not just have passive morality of good and bad. And the idea to have faith, and that's where evil scores. They have faith that if I am greedy, if I am intolerant, if I push others out, I'll succeed. So what we need as moralists, and what we need to tell the youth, have faith in your dharma. It can deliver. It has to be nurtured. It has to be taken care of. And that will deliver. Because in any case, you're not going to be permanent. So give it a try.
Thank you so much, Professor Mukherjee. I have been a very lucky moderator so far that everybody has kindly been able to confine to their time. They have so much to say and so much to share. It's criminal on my part to stop them. But you know how the arithmetic works. 7 into 5 is 35 and 10 into 5 is 50. That will take us to 9 o'clock. On a chilly evening, even that is too much. So a couple of points which he made, very telling, why people should be good. Vivekananda talked about the conviction in the powers of goodness. One has to be good not because one is afraid of not being good, but one has to be good because one is convinced that goodness alone will triumph. Wicked people have more faith in the power of wickedness than good people have in the power of goodness. That is the tragedy of today. We have plenty of good people, but they are weak, goody people who don't believe that it is good to be good. I shall be good because I will be good. So that's a message which he gave. When you're talking about death, I was remembering an interesting incident in Vivekananda's life. In the West, in the Harvard Philosophical Club, Swamiji was questioned by a person. Said, your religion is too otherworldly. It doesn't help man to live. Instantly Vivekananda shot back, but it helps him to die. The entire life is a preparation for a glorious death. As you know, Tulsidas said, when you came into this world, you cried and everybody was laughing. Live in such a way, when you leave this world, you shall leave laughing and leave everybody crying. Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. Then we'll have Dr. Sudarshan. As you know, he has applied Vivekananda every inch of the way. He was with the Ramakrishna Mission and inspired from childhood. And he has struggled, and we like to hear some of the struggles which he went through in applying Vivekananda and how success came by his grace.
Respected Swamiji and friends, it's a great honor to be in the midst of you this evening. I'll tell a little story how an ordinary boy was converted by Swamiji and made use of as an instrument for saving lives. I was 12 years old. I went with my father to a village, my aunt's place, and he literally died, probably a massive heart attack, and I had to helplessly watch him die. I was the only son with him. So that day, I didn't weep much, but I made a determination that I will become a doctor and save lives rest of my life. And I didn't want to be a passive spectator of somebody close to you dying. So after I had a good marks to enter into medical school, but I was underage. We had that tradition. I had given a jump. If you're a good student, they give a jump from 2nd to 4th standard. So I had to complete 16 years by October 30th. I was finishing in December 30th, so they didn't allow me to join the medical school. So I worked in a flour mill, and 2.5 months' salary was my entrance fees to the medical college next year. And that was the period one of my friend took me to Ramakrishna Mission in Bangalore, read about Swamiji, his life and teachings. So the mantra, they alone live who live for others, rest are more dead than alive, changed my life. And I wanted to work in the remote areas of India and save lives. The famous quotation, as long as millions live in hunger and poverty, I hold every man a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not least heed to them. The government spends about 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs on each medical student, and it comes from the taxpayers' money. Every tribal who buys a matchbox, that tax is what educates me. So I had to pay back that. That became my philosophy of life. And after graduation, I went to Mayavati, worked there. I was also in Belur Math for some time, and then started my work in BR Hills, the Veerappans area, and started with a clinic in a small hut. Then I started a school with 6 children next year. So amongst those 6 children, 4 have become postgraduates, 2 have done PhDs, and Jadia is the president of the organization now. We have about several graduates and postgraduates coming out of the school. This transformation also, I had to, last 30, 35 years, we have been fighting for the land rights. I'm happy to say now, last year, we got the land rights and the community rights for all the tribal people in that region. That was a struggle. I just want to say, Abdul Kalam has been a good friend. He came there when he was a DRDO, working in the DRDO. He was told by one of the spiritual person, find 100 Punyatmas who can transform the country. And he telephoned to me and said, I am in search of those 100 Punyatmas. Somebody has suggested your name, I am coming there. So he came, spent the whole day. It was a source of great inspiration. And when he became the president, we wrote to him, inviting him for the 25th anniversary of our institution. And he came. He celebrated his birthday with us in BR Hills. I was also later, I wanted to scale up this program which we had done, and my basis of this work has been Swamiji's concept of potential divinity of man, empowering people. Everybody has this strength. Empowering people is the ultimate solution for the problems, and that's how I applied the philosophy of social work through Swamiji's ideas. Now, through Karuna Trust, now we are reaching out to very remote parts of the India. We work in Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Manipur, Orissa, Rajasthan, and Karnataka, and we reach out to 1.5 million people and providing primary health care, more than 150 doctors and about 1,500 healthcare workers, nurses, pharmacists, and community health workers, about 3,000 working in remote parts of India. I just calculated last year we could save nearly 560 infant deaths, that is, children dying of acute respiratory infection and diarrheal disease. If these primary health centers were with the government, would have lost 560 people and we could avert those deaths. This joy of saving lives, the joy of the fulfillment which you get is because of the Swamiji's message. When we are spiritual, our heart expands and we feel love for the other people, and we want to see that the poor people get the health care and save lives. We are now, I was also the chairman of the task force for Karnataka state, and I could improve the health system there and provide, based on the strength of working in the primary health care, we could give concrete recommendations to improve the health system. So Swamiji his one spark has made me do all this work. It's a fascinating, the power, the capacity of Swamiji's to inspire people is tremendous. And I also owe my strength because of my formative period after my graduation in Belur Math, the love and affection of the Ramakrishna Mission Swamis, and the foundation which was laid during my training period as brahmachari in these areas sustains me. Very often in social work, there is what's called a burnt out syndrome. But 35 years, every moment has been a great joy, and I have never felt any burnt out syndrome. That's what the message is. If you want to really work, you should have a spiritual basis, or at least the Swamiji's inspiration to back us up. With his inspiration, we can go on. Every moment, every challenge which we face is a new challenge, like a mountaineer, and we can move ahead. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Dr. Sudarshan had 30 more seconds in which he could share, but during the question-answer session, he'll be enlightening us more. Swami Vivekananda said, following Sudarshan's speech, a great religious prophet saying this, I don't believe in a God who can't give me 2 pieces of bread when I am alive, but promises me eternal heaven after I am dead. If such be he, his worth is not a pie. The religious leader speaking. And Swami Vivekananda always believed that every person has divinity within him, and the divinity has to manifest through humanity. First, try to treat human beings as human beings first. Therefore, he said the humanism of Vivekananda was actually based on the divinity of the concept of the divinity of the human soul. And when he went to the West and talked about this, people were flabbergasted, very happily flabbergasted, because they have been constantly told that they are sinners. And they have been born in sin and they have to wash off the sin in a peculiar way. Swamiji said, to call a man a sinner is a standing libel in human destiny. And you are heirs of the immortal bliss. And the power of Vivekananda, in a very mystical way we feel, those who believe, he himself said, I shall not cease to work even after I am dead. I will throw off this mortal coil. I will inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God. We believe anybody who believes in goodness and truth and purity and unselfishness, works in the name of Swami Vivekananda, derives his power directly from Swami Vivekananda, Now that he has thrown off his mortal coil, he is working through thousands and hundreds of people who believe that goodness, purity, unselfishness are the values which are eternal and they are timeless. Thank you, Dr. Sudarshan. Now we have Mr. E.V. Srinivas. As you know, he has Illumin Knowledge Resources. He had his graduation from, as you know, from IIT Bombay and went on to IIM Ahmedabad. Usually such people who go from IIT to IIM end up selling watches, Titan watches, Kaitan fans and soaps. Very unfortunate, but he is a one fortunate person stung by the Vivekananda bug who chose to be different. Let us listen to his story.
Pranam Maharaj and good evening everybody. So the word, the phrase applied Vivekananda, I think was quite close to Swamiji himself. But he didn't call it applied Vivekananda. I think he called it practical Vedanta. And practical Vedanta is really about saying that how do you apply Vedanta into each individual's life in a manner which is contexted and relevant to that person's life. Which means, and the end result of practical Vedanta which Swamiji put out was that a cobbler would be a better cobbler, a teacher would be a better teacher, a banker would be a better banker, and so on and so forth. In short, a little touch of divinity combined with a spirit of service could transform or transmute every single profession or every single vocation into an opportunity for nation building, an opportunity for expansion of self, an opportunity for invoking or awakening that which is the infinite within us. This was his vision of practical Vedanta. Over the last 18 years that I've set up this company called Illumin. After graduation, I set up an earlier company. I never worked for anybody. We built it into a large company, and as people do, I sold that company at the age of 30. But I used the money not for setting up one more company, but for studying Vivekananda and for creating a model for practical Vedanta. So over these years, we've worked with almost 40 or 45 major groups or communities of various kinds. But in each case, we have tried to apply Vivekananda in the language of that community or that group of people. And I'd like to share a few examples with you so that it gives you a sense that Vivekananda is alive and kicking in all parts. It's not as if he's been consigned to some corner as some people, sometimes people might believe. But it's not in the language that we understand. It's not in the language of his quotations, but it's in the language of the people who are benefiting from Vivekananda. So 3-4 examples just to show you. Over these years, we've worked with bankers, for example, with State Bank of India. And the question that we ask them is that what is the purpose of banking and how are we going to make a banker an enlightened banker? And the answer lies right in State Bank's logo today, which is called Banker to Every Indian. And that led the company to create a 24-month intervention that reached out to 200,000 of their people with one message that how do I take this vision of Vivekananda but we didn't use the word Vivekananda except as a framework. But the message that they got was how do we become citizen SBI? So if I am a citizen state banker, how will I do my banking differently? How will I serve customers differently? How will I change the way I engage with the communities around me? How will I deal with my subordinates differently? How will I try to take up or give a loan with a different viewpoint altogether, not simply by looking at the numbers themselves, but also looking at the spirit behind the whole thing. And using these models, we actually worked with this group to reinvent whole parts of banking. or whole parts of at least some practices of banking, not all of banking, but practices in banking, which were then applied across the entire bank. So when you start applying Vivekananda, you find that you start reinventing whole parts of the way we do things, simply because you have to apply it in context. We similarly applied Vivekananda with petrol pump attendants. So the problem that they said was that there are more than 500,000 petrol pump attendants. They are the lowest sector of the working group of people because nobody really cares for them. When was the last time you noticed a petrol pump attendant when you drove into a petrol pump for fuel? You don't remember them. You ignore them. So these people were trying to say that I need to give you customer service and try to help you do better customer service. Enter Vivekananda. He asked the question that if the first question is that why would you respect somebody if you didn't respect yourself? So therein lies Swami Vivekananda's message of self-esteem. If you are able to give these petrol pump attendants a measure of self-esteem, then they will value their work, they'll value themselves, and they'll probably value the engagement with the customer. This led to almost 100,000 petrol pump attendants going through a program with simple ideas which derive from Swami Vivekananda. In fact, they came out of the writings of, Swami Ranganathan's work, which is his simple idea of saying that who am I? Am I just simply the lowest member of a hierarchy who has no value, who has no economic or social value? Or am I somebody who is a repository of strength? Do I have Atma Balam? Do I have character strength? And is that dependent on somebody's money, on anybody else's money? I can have intellectual strength in my own level. I can have physical strength. If this strength is there within me, then a little bit of Swamiji has entered into me. So this is the vision that comes to a petrol pump attendant. A little bit of Swamiji enters, he becomes a better petrol pump attendant. Similarly, when you apply it into every part of people's lives, we are applying it to school children. But there the language is very different. There we ask, who am I? I am actually a person with infinite possibilities. So as a child, should I view myself or judge myself on my marks and on my relative grade in the class? Or should I judge myself on my talents? Or should I judge myself on being somebody who has infinite possibilities within me? I can be whoever I want to be. Message of Swami Vivekananda. You are divine and the goal of your life is to manifest that divinity within. We are applying this for people who are engineering students in Gujarat. What is the purpose of your career? The purpose of my career is to contribute. Swami Vivekananda's message of service. Today, every single engineering student in Gujarat state goes through a program called the Contributor Program. All these are just examples to show you that Swamiji is all over, but only in the language of the people who then apply them into their lives and make them better. Thank you.
Thank you, Srinivas. It's so inspiring that he has been taking up idea after idea and converting them into packages which will reach people and transform lives. Vivekananda poignantly said, our education is entirely negative, and therefore people who go through this kind of education, thanks to Macaulay, who proclaimed in 1835 that he shall give such an education to the Indians, from outside they'll look like Indians, inwardly they'll be thoroughly anglicized. Like Sri Krishna taking his birth in Kamsa's jail, exactly a year later came Sri Ramakrishna, who completely and absolutely ignored Macaulay education, but chose his best disciples from among those who were educated in the Macaulay way. And that is the paradox. And as he said, Swami Vivekananda said the power of the Atman within. The idea of the Atman has been there in the books. We have in the Gita and the Upanishads in thundering voice. And Swamiji said that Vedanta, which was hiding in the forests and the caves, I'll bring them to the marketplace and transform lives through this one concept. Many people ask, is it too high an ideal? How the idea of the Atman can be applied to the marketplace, to anybody and everybody? Swami said yes. And he was asked once a question, what is your Vedantic idea of civilization? Swami Vivekananda said, that civilization is the greatest where the highest ideas become the most practical. So the idea of Advaita, that everybody is potentially divine and the Atman is within, and he said, tell everybody, preach everybody the idea of the Atman and the idea of Advaita. Power will come, glory will come, all this good and great will come when the soul awakens to a self-conscious divinity. So he said, if a lawyer thinks he is the Atman, he'll be a better lawyer. If a student thinks he is the Atman, he'll be a better student. And if a householder thinks he is a Atman, he'll be a better householder. The same idea of the divinity, awakening the power within, which is already there. We have been constantly giving negative inputs to our people. So Vivekananda, therefore, as Rabindranath is supposed to have said, if you want to know India, study Vivekananda. In him, everything is positive and nothing negative. That's the message which you are getting today. And our last panelist will be Dr. Anindita Dutt, who came to India. She was telling us just before the program that she came with great hopes to India back to do something meaningful and useful. And she was lamenting, but I have realized that it is not easy to do something useful. And I said that this realization itself is important, that you can't do everything at the same time. There Vivekananda steps in and says, infinite patience, infinite purity, and infinite perseverance. These are the three mantras to success. And above all, love. Dr. Anindita.
Good evening, everyone. So, of course, I've spent 1,000,000 years abroad. It feels 1,000,000 to me. And I'm used to ladies going first. But I think Maharaj put me right at the end because ladies also talk a lot. So I think if I go over time by a few minutes, it'll be forgivable. That's a lady standard time. So the way I applied Vivekananda, to me, Swamiji left us with only one message, that is being and becoming. And everything else, he said, was an instruction on how to get there. As Mr. Srinivas said, that he told Sister Nivedita, my ideal in life is to reveal unto man his divinity and how to manifest it in every movement of life. But for most of us, Nishkam Karma or Shibogana Jibo Sheba are very out of reach ideals. We all have to begin where we are. So I find it easier to try and emulate the secular aspects of Swamiji's personality, and I feel if we all do it collectively, then we can change society. But Swamiji cannot be applied in bits and pieces. As Maharaj pointed out, Swamiji has to be applied in totality. You need intellectual rigor, you need integrity, and you need empathy. And so what would be the action plan to implement such a vision? So I have some pointers because this is about students. So students, here are some pointers for you. So the best gift you can give to the world, in my opinion, is who you become. Swamiji left his mark because Narendranath became Swamiji. And by who you become, I don't mean Vice President Citibank, though I do wish you overflowing bank balances. I mean, do you become a credible human being? And do people other than family and friends, are they able to rely on you? মা বাবার বাধ্য সন্তান হওয়াটাই বাঙালিদের শেষ কথা হয়ে যায়. But we have to become more than that. Swamiji used to say that I hate the world with its fair faces and its hollowness beneath, its false hearts, its howling righteousness and its utter hollowness beneath. And coming back, I see a lot of pretense, a lot of false statements. So I wish for you that you learn to walk the talk. You say what you mean what you say, and you abandon all pretenses. And you apply. Swamiji said, look at what he's doing, not what he's saying. Apply this in every aspect of life, at your home, at your workplace, in the monastery, and definitely on yourself. And everybody will fail. None of us are perfect. And it doesn't mean that you will love anybody less. It just means you will be able to manage your expectations. But don't stop at just becoming a credible human being. Try to become a superior human being. Swamiji said that more and more I find greatness, I look for greatness in little things. Even a coward can become brave in the footlight. And he tells us about Sir Philip Sidney, the British warrior poet, who, as he lay dying on the battlefield, he offered water to another soldier, saying, "Your need is greater than mine." So when the person is in front of you, try to help the person without regard to his gender, his marital status, and his socioeconomic status. Help him not on your terms, but on his terms, so that the problem is solved. And when you read Vivekananda, don't just use him to feel inspired. See how he's thinking, very critically, very analytically, very constructively. Try to become a visionary. You know, the British, they destroyed our education system because they needed workers to carry out instructions without questioning in order to fuel the Industrial Revolution. And therefore, we have become robots. We are outstanding project managers, but they are no visionaries. So you must ignite your ability to think creatively, because what India needs now is more than your money. We keep complaining that Indians don't donate much, but what we really need are innovative ideas that have been customized to the local ecosystem. And to the professionals in the crowd, please allow me to remind you that if we are going to teach our youngsters Vivekananda and Vedanta, then we have a shared moral responsibility to put a system in place, both professional lives and in our personal lives, that rewards idealism. Otherwise, we are setting them up for frustration and failure. Swamiji said 100 years ago, the bane of our society is conceit and jealousy, and to this day, it is sad that it continues unabated. You know, we continuously see our peers get ahead by gaming the system. And sadly, I see Indian parents proud that their son, they just managed to game the system so well. Many of us are familiar with Rajat Gupta. He was a great Vivekananda fan. I'm sure he still is. And we repeatedly give the coveted projects to people we like, people who will not challenge us, bypassing worthy candidates. And in doing so, we dilute the integrity of our institutions, and we send the message that it is okay to sell your soul and the tradition continues. The reason we do this, what I feel, is because we cannot separate loyalty from ethics and add to this our own insecurities. If we have to build a meritocratic society, then we have to have intellectual integrity. Most often in life, when the situation gets challenging, we abandon our values and we readily forgive ourselves for it. But that is the only time it matters. Ladies in the crowd, I know that it is equally applicable for men as well as for women, but since I am familiar with our plight, I will speak for us. Because of our foreign policy, India has the perception of being a tolerant nation, but actually in our daily lives, to use Swamiji's phrase, we throw bombshells of hatred around. There is too much verbal and emotional abuse of women, of the aged, and perhaps even children. And what is worse is I find that the elders do not step in to denounce it. They sometimes even instigate it, sometimes they feel proud of it, sometimes even endorse it. I have seen Bengali mothers, when you tell them that their son is misbehaving, they say, "Besh koreche." No developed nation endorses abuse. So all the victims of violence, ladies, we have to speak up and wipe the scourge from the society. And all the people who stay silent despite being victims, even we are propagating violence, because he is not going to stop with us. Swamiji said that much evil in the world exists because good people choose to do nothing about it. The era of Aryabhat, C.V. Raman, J.C. Bose is long over. Sadly, we have become a nation of emulators. We tried to emulate the British, we are trying to emulate the Americans, but we have not embraced their fierce patriotism and their zeal for building world-class institutions. Let us for once try to emulate our dear own Swamiji. To me, Swamiji is not a topic to be discussed. He's a philosophy to be lived. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In Sanskrit we say, Madhurena samapayet. That is a sweet note. With so much of passion and agony she spoke about what's happening now, what ought to be happening would be happening if Swamiji were followed. And the crux of it that Swamiji denounced hypocrisy. If Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji hated anything, that is hypocrisy and egotism. Sri Ramakrishna graced Girish Chandra Ghosh, he gave blessings to Kalipada Ghosh, but to Hajra and Mahimacharan Chakravarti was very cross. The first one was hypocritical and the second was egoistic. These two, the Lord just doesn't tolerate. So the famous statement of Sri Ramakrishna, the entire spirituality were put in just 2 sentences of Ramakrishna. In Bengali he said, Mon mukh ek karo, bhaver ghore churi karo na. The bhava is something which is not translatable so easily into English. And bhaver ghore churi, and all the great pandits have tried in vain to translate this into English. What is bhaver ghor and what is churi? Peculiar translations exist, but all of us know what he means. It's exactly following the Vedic dictum, Vang me manasi pratisthita mano me vachi pratishthitam. The mind and speech should become one. Mon mukh ek karo. So this is a very important. Swamiji in fact thundered, which I was remembering when Anindita was delivering a passionate address. Swamiji said, religions of the world have become lifeless mockeries. What the world now wants is character. Such a character which is one of boundless love, whose every word will tell like thunderbolt. If you have that power of character, you can go cleave mountains, as Swamiji said. Thank you, Anindita. Now it's open for a discussion. I'm told that the questions will first come from our young friends. And of course, if time permits, it should permit, I'll also throw it open to the house, slightly older people. Just because we are old, we always say we want younger people become old. Nothing can do about it. Yes, questions.
Good evening, everyone. Dignitaries, members of the panel, members of the audience. As Mrs. Dutt very rightly said, ladies go first, so I'll be the first one asking a question here. I'm Savi Garg from Mon High School for Girls. I was reading about Swami Vivekananda a few days ago.
Please also tell us to which panelist your question is addressed.
My question isn't addressed to any speaker in particular, it's addressed to the panel as a whole, so anyone could take it. I was reading about Swami Vivekananda and I came across some really, really beautiful ideas, but one particular idea struck, which was Swami Vivekananda preached non-attachment. He said that you shouldn't have any feelings of attachment towards anything you do or towards people in order to avoid getting hurt. And while that's an ideal to think about, applying it in practicality does not make much sense to me, because if I'm doing a particular kind of work and if I love doing that work, then naturally I'll do it better. So how exactly do you justify that?
I really think, obviously, pardon my impudence in the presence of Swamiji to say so, but probably I'm not entirely mistaken that this represents the evolution. Swamiji was and remained to be the great admirer of Buddha. And this probably, if you go into the fundamental tenets of Buddhism, the fourfold truths and the eightfold paths and things like that, because you see, Buddha was the one word that Buddha avoided throughout his religious things was the concept of God, right? So Buddha is considered to be the world's first socialist /atheist. The atheist part of it is slightly debatable. But I really think what he was trying to say is, Swamiji, through his Vedantism and through his giving, again, the preeminence to a lot of things, because the fact that there was an upsurge in the popular dealings and discourse in Buddhism was again due to him. Because he not only revived the lost precepts of Vedanta, he also did a lot to revive the teachings of Buddha, which later on, stuck on in the West. And when he referred to that, because I think Swamiji, you look at somebody like him, and your and my life has to be distinguished from his life, where honestly, he's leading a life of teaching, a life of building up institutions. But unlike us, really, he's not yet kind of inseparably married to the passbook or logging into his savings bank account, every 6 hours a day. So there is a stream of thought, and that is where I think he comes from. And this is, along with his Vedantic ideas, this is one idea which again, thanks to him, that this detachment theory, which originated from the original ideas of Buddha, owes a lot to Swamiji again for its sort of regaining popularity in the world.
Yeah, detachment is detachment from our egotism, selfishness, but it is passion to do selfless work. That's a tremendous passion with which we work. So detachment, vairagya is from our selfishness and our egoism. Right? That's what Swamiji meant.
I'll add to what Dr. Sarkar said. Actually, this comes from the Bhagavad Gita idea of anasakti. If you go through the Bhagavad Gita, every page of it speaks about it, and it talks about nishkama karma. You do karma, but don't ask for the results of karma, which is very strange. The Mimamsakas of India have questioned this. How can anybody do something and not get the results? I do something only for the results. And the ideal of nishkama karma, therefore, they reject it totally as absolutely foolish. That prayojanam manuddishya mandobina pravartate. Even a fool will not do anything unless he gets some returns. So that was the Mimamsaka idea. So what was the motivation behind the Bhagavan Sri Krishna's assertion, and as Buddha also he said, that you do something and don't ask for the results of work. What it actually means, so I tell my students in a very simple way they understand. Do you know how many times Sachin Tendulkar got out between 90 and 100? You should have the statistics as young people. Several times, I don't know the exact number. So many times he got out at 95, 96. Why? Because he was looking for 100. A person who has come from 0 to 95, it just takes 5 more runs. The moment he crossed 90, he immediately thought, century, century, century. And therefore, immediately he lost his focus. So what nishkama karma and detachment, they say, you play the game of cricket without looking at the scoreboard. You keep playing. And if you keep playing, of course you will get runs. The moment the motivation for your playing becomes the scoreboard, you lose the focus on the game itself. So you can think about this more carefully. Even in examination, you take a question and try to give your best. Obviously, you'll get good marks. If you're always calculating about the marks, then your performance will be less. So Swamiji therefore said, pay as much attention to the means of work as much to the goal of work. So the goal is so alluring. We look at the goal. So when you're walking on a mountain path, so if you look at the goal, I have to reach there, you'll fall down. Concentrate on the next step. Swami Smarananandaji, our revered Vice President, gave us a very interesting story which he experienced. Once he was going in a temple on the top of a hilltop, about 1,000 steps, not much. In the mountainous path, suddenly there's big fog, completely enveloping. He said, we could not see anything. We're just in the middle of the path. So he didn't know what to do, whether to go forward or backward or sit down and wait. Then he just looked up and saw he could see just the next step and nothing else. Then I said, when I have the next step in sight, why not walk? When he walked that, he saw the next step. Then he walked that, he saw the next step. And then he walked the whole way. This is what detachment means. So you concentrate on the immediate next step and not something very glorious. So vision is okay. That's why dream big and have a vision. And the vision and the mission of the corporate sector, I am slightly unhappy about it. The vision is okay, but what are you going to do now, immediately? Concentrate on the next step. There is a famous poem by Cardinal Newman. He says, I do not want to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. So start little by little and you will go very, very far, provided you have the perseverance and the patience. Thank you. Next question.
Good evening. I'm Ritesh Chatterjee from the Scottish Church College. Ma'am, I would like to ask you, what according to you is the most needed social change at this point of time?
Like Maharaj said and Shamiji said, I think we have lost our values as a society. If we just focus on getting those back, the macro issues will just fall into place. We have lost our integrity at home, therefore we have lost our integrity at work. If we focus on that one thing, I think the rest will just fall into place. What we are trying to do is we are trying to patch, find a healthcare solution. We're trying to patch it. We are trying to have economic development, just raising historic buildings and finding quick money. Quickness doesn't bring a lasting effect. We just need to go back to basics.
I have a slightly different take, and it might just help. I think that the biggest social problem we face is that we are victims in our mind instead of being creators of our destiny. In every corporation, in every institution I go to, we find that people are complaining all the time. They're saying that I am not strong enough. They say that I have, in fact, had the wonderful experience of seeing a deputy managing director of a company telling me that, top management doesn't listen to me. So,
Who is the top management?
yeah, he is the top management. There is just one. But you see, so there is a constant complaining in our nation. There is a constant finding fault with others. There is a constant feeling that we are weak and and therefore it leads, in a sense, to this absence of integrity. It leads to a corrosion of self. It leads also to a sense of, and once that sense of victimhood increases, then it kind of justifies all kinds of means to achieve your end. So I think the first thing that is needed is strength, and inner strength, and the belief that I can make a difference. And I think that, I think is, at least from my, my understanding, the biggest challenge, and I think Swamiji has the answer to that one challenge which our nation faces.
Professor Mukherjee.
Swamiji gives the answer, to the question you raised. He said, there are 3 things that will make you great. First, be good and trying being good. The second, stop being jealous and suspicious. And third, try to help others to do good. So if you follow these 3, and that's what he referred to as positive morality, this is what it. For a simpler mind, in a simpler way, if to put it in your language, the question of detachment, I think Swamiji was a rationalist. What he was trying to tell you is about the inevitability of what you are. If I take a vessel of water, cold water, and start heating it, initial stages it will be cold. And that is what he says in Nirbudh, ignorance. You have not realized what you are. So there's nothing wrong in where you are, the plane that you are in. But when you start heating it up, self-realization, awakening the Atma, getting yourself free, ultimately it will be vapor. So the same chemical composition is going to be vapor. That's freedom. That's detachment. Because innately, you do not belong the form that you are. You are the Atma that must release itself. So continue to be good. It's a process. It's a distillation. Realize that.
I'll give you a contrarian point of view because being an amateur historian, look back at history. I really don't know which era in history was better than what you are today. When you start off from the Ice Age, the Bronze Age, the First World War, Second World War, right up to today. Today, at least you are thinking of your fellow citizen. We've lived through many altruistic beliefs, religious beliefs, and today we are in a frame of mind where you can be a rationalist, you can be an analyst, you can be whatever you want to. So I think, get rid of this very infectious viral disease called pessimism, which always thought that the last 5 years were far better than the next 5 years to come. There is no evidence in history to suggest that. And even religion has not made a fig of a difference because Homo sapiens is about 250,000 years on the surface of the planet. The oldest religion is about 5,000 years of age. So what happened in the 245,000 years prior to that? That was perhaps the more peaceful time of human era when there were less wars, less destruction, and less discrimination between person to person. But I think, this kind of disease, where every time you think that, I think your generation is far cleverer than mine. Your generation is far more empowered than mine. So that is natural evolution, because like the cell phone, your brain is naturally going to be 10% more equipped than mine in the very least, right? So that is evolution, that is natural improvement, and this disease of thinking that, we are always sinking and going into doomsday. One chap called Nostradamus lived it all out, and happy for all of us, he was not barely correct. Thank you.
So I completely agree with Dr. Sarkar. Bangladesh have a gala rob, jano. See, the younger generation should stop doing this. Hok color of cholchilo, ekon cholcho gala rob. And as he rightly said, I always tell my students, the worst society was the Mahabharata society. What happened to Nirbhaya is nothing compared to what happened to Draupadi. But the helpless woman did not have women's commission, did not have human rights, did not have the media to shout. Bhishma Pitamaha and the Dronacharya and Karna were sitting there and then hanging their heads in shame. Karna was, of course, jubilant. So every society goes through all this. And as he rightly said, the present generation is very, very fortunate to have the latest technology equipment so that they can do so much of good. If Vivekananda and Ramakrishna had this technology, Vivekananda could enormous good he could have done. So the brains are becoming sharper and people are feeling for somebody else. How many societies for welfare societies, how many people are coming out, and even Velur Mutt, you'll be astonished to know how many young people come and embrace this life of brahmacharya and sannyasa, giving up. They are all top people, educated in some of the top class institutions in the world and having renounced their jobs. So I asked them, why did you do this? I found there is no meaning in going through all this. I feel great satisfaction and the inner freedom of a sannyasin combined with serving others in a sense of freedom, not with bondage. I serve people and I feel greatly happy. So the present generation is much more well equipped. The only social change we need is to recognize that great things are happening and greater things are going to happen. For we should equip ourselves. All of you should equip yourselves to be able to do this. Challenges are coming. People are going to ask you, you come from India? Yes. Can you tell me this? Oh, I don't know myself. So equip yourself, know about the past glory of India, the present cause of present decadence, and how glorious it's going to be later on. The entire humanity is going through a very glorious upheaval, according to me. Thank you. Next.
Good evening, one and all. Actually, I have a very technical question. And I guess Professor Mukherjee would be the right person to answer that, along with everyone else. The fact is, when we talk about applied Vivekananda, and if you talk about applying Vivekananda in the sphere of education which pertains to a youth, now I have studied in a CBSE school, and presently I'm preparing for my UPSC examination, which is a paper on ethics. So we are mandated to read a lot of ethics prescribed by the government, and also we were party to the life skill education that CBSE mandated in its schools. Nowhere, either in the life skill education which was formulated and given to us in school, or in the ethics paper for the UPSC, do we have any section which pertains to the ideas of Swami Vivekananda. We read Plato, we read Marx, in certain extent we are also given this neoclassical ideas of morality, which was pertinent from the time of Macaulay, and even today what we have in our countries is basically Victorian sense of morality, whether it be our attitude towards film censorship, or whether it be our government's attitude towards politicizing or moral policing society. So why do you think there is no initiative by the people who are formulating the policies themselves to incorporate and inculcate a lot of Swami Vivekananda in the curriculum per se? Thank you.
The whole issue is that we still believe in sermonizing. We believe in telling you about what's good and bad. I think the lesson is to be learned from Swamiji's own writings. Shankara in the 8th century talked about ethics being lower than the Advaita. It's Swamiji who said there's a non-dual state. There is ethics of personal and the universe are the same. So there is no difference between the two. Now that's very difficult for somebody to tell you distill yourself towards perfection, and any state of your existence is acceptable. He got his lessons from many people. You talked about Marx. He himself said he was a believer in removing poverty. But the difference between Marx and Vivekananda is Marx created in the process of removal of poverty a sense of hatred. I am poor because you're rich. Swamiji's idea is that the rich are duty bound to take care of the poor. The spirit of cooperation, which comes from innate love. His idea of oneself, discovery of goodness within yourself, comes from the Confucian thought of Menzu. Actually, he's the first who's supposed to have said, we are innately good. And this innate goodness is something that Swamiji recognizes. And don't think he had no place for atheists. He looked at Russell, and Russell was saying, if you look at Russell, you find the same story in Marriage and Morals. Life or happiness lies in giving, not in taking. So if you look at the true morals of whatever you're saying, whether it's taught as value education, which is just a pebble on the road, the whole idea is to make the journey, not look at the milestones. So it's all right to have value education, but the point is, walk that path. Start the process. And don't be disappointed you did a little. At least you made an effort.
He's asking why Vivekananda was not incorporated.
Yes, Vivekananda was not incorporated because it's very difficult for people, I believe, to talk about dynamic morality. But you've done Vivekananda. When you go for slum clearing, when you go for rehabilitation of villages, when you go for giving food to the poor people, that's Vivekananda. That's applied Vivekananda.
I really think, something which I referred to when I was speaking initially, I think we have done a great personality and a great philosopher a huge disfavor when we have restricted the discussions of Vivekananda, which is extremely intense, extremely devout, but extremely confined. And for the present, what I think through all our available instruments, which is individuals, which is the organizations like the Ramakrishna Mission and Mutt and everybody else who continues to be inspired of him, more scholarly discourse, which is outside the sort of, the limits of devotion, because devotion, like in marriage, is a dangerous phenomenon. Right. It is a very non-critical state of mind. And that non-critical state of mind today does not call for academic incorporation. You have to distinguish between the two. So like Russell, like Santayana, like other thinkers of this century, we really have to we have to be fearless enough to put him to far more discussion, to far more debates, which is outside the kind of devotion. Because we are devoted, we have had the cultural proximity to him. There are yet others in the world who have not had the linguistic, cultural proximity to this great mind. So in our own way, through our own institutions and instruments, we owe it to him to throw his ideas, his lives, his chronology of actions out open in the world. Because I really think confined devotion will not do our aspirations a whole lot of good for the future. Thanks.
Following the trail of Dr. Sarkar, I just add a few comments. There could be two reasons, according to me, why Vivekananda has not been included. One is his saffron robe. Vivekananda is always considered as a religious leader first, and incidentally he talks about many things. And therefore, though for whom religion is taboo, I know whom, you understand whom I mean, the word religion immediately is taboo. A person wearing the saffron robe talking about it, he may talk big. Even if Vivekananda invented the theory of relativity, they would say theory of relativity is okay, but Vivekananda is not acceptable. That's number one. Number two is religion. Number two is Vivekananda is too devastating, as Dr. Sarkar said. His first thing is to demolish your ideas first. And therefore, people are afraid to approach Vivekananda. You should be a little more milder, you pontificate. As Professor Mukherjee said, you pontificate, he said, do this, be good, it's good to be good, etc. The first thing Vivekananda will do is to first devastatingly demolish your old ideas. And therefore, is one small incident in his own life. There was a discussion among the American disciples. Who is the greatest Indian preacher who come to USA? They were mentioning so many names. Nobody mentioned Vivekananda's name. So one of the disciples said, but don't you think he is the greatest? Then everybody said, we know he is the greatest, but we are afraid to mention him. He overwhelms us. So the danger is, I also tell my young friends, don't go too close to Vivekananda. From a distance you obey and then you have the flags and then Jai Vivekananda. If you go too close to him, he devours you. So we have been, unfortunately, been devoured. It's just a flame which you just can't resist. So the power is so much that people don't take it. People want an ambi-pambi preacher. He will also talk about good things and bad things and so on. Vivekananda, the first thing will devastate. In fact, Ramakrishna said, hey, dekho Naren, khap khula talwar, kauke mane na, amakeo mane na. Can you think of a guru telling this to a disciple? So Vivekananda, once Ramakrishna asked him, you don't believe in what I say, why do you come here? He straight came the answer, I love you, I like your purity and then holiness. Does that mean I should accept whatever you say? So that is the answer by a disciple. So Vivekananda always wanted critical his examination of Vivekananda. Vivekananda will be most happy to be critically examined and not devotionally worshipped. In fact, once he said, in Bengali I'll say this, কেউ আমার সামনে এসে আমাকে পুজো করে আরতি করে ভূত ওর ঘাড় মোটকাবো বলে সো স্বামীজির জন্মদিনে আমরা যখন আরতি করি খুব ভয়ে ভয়ে করি কখন ওর ঘাড় মুটকে দেবে What he means is Indians are first hero worshippers and they'll never follow the teachings. গীতা পড়েছো? হ্যাঁ গীতা বাবা কি বড় গ্রন্থ আমার বাড়িতে আছে তো পড়েছো? ওরে বাবা ইটস টু হোলি টু বি ওপেনড এত পবিত্র প্রতিদিন ফুল দিয়ে প্রণাম করি কিন্তু কোনোদিনই আমি পড়িনি ওটা There is a story, I think Ramakrishna said this. একজন বাংলা সকলে বুঝেন তো? Is anybody doesn't understand Bengali? একজন চেলা একজন ছিল গুরুর কাছে গিয়ে বলে স্যার আমি কিন্তু আপনার সেবা করব হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে কর তখন বলে এটা ঝাড়ু দে এটা খুব নোংরা হয়ে আছে স্যার আপনার পবিত্র চরণ এখানে স্পর্শ করেছে আমার মতন অধম এখানে কি ঝাড়ু দেবো He never did anything. Then the Guru said, bring a glass of water. Sir, আমার মতন অধম আপনার পবিত্র শরীর আমার এটা অপবিত্র হাসতে আপনার কিন্তু জলসেবা করাবো আমি কখনো পারবো না Then he didn't do it. Then the Guru said, প্রচণ্ড গরম লাগছে এটা পাখা কর না স্যার আমি কি করে আপনাকে পাখা করতে পারি আমি তো আধম Then Guru himself started fanning এই পিছন দিকে এরকম দাঁড়িয়ে আছে কিরে ওখানে প্রসাদী বাতাস আমি পাবো না This is the hypocrisy of our Indian mind. You will never follow. So Swamiji said, don't worship me, follow what I say. So next question.
First of all, my pranam to the Maharaj and every other dignitaries and a very good evening to everyone. I'm Abhishek Bose from Scottish Church College. I happen to be obliged to be a student of the college where Swami Vivekananda was an alumnus. His home is a walking distance. I happen to be very much obliged. My question is that to Dr. Kunal Sarkar is India ready for a political reform or is a social reform is what we need?
I think India is basically in need of a human reform, And in what shape it comes is a secondary question, right? It can come through any forms, right? If you are very skeptic of the political structure, whenever you and I have given up, hypothecated the administration to a country, the only job which requires no educational qualifications, not even the very minimum in the entire country, is to become a member of the parliament, right? So these are the kind of things. I think every structure, whether you criticize the Indian social structure, the political administration structure, is going to have its deficiencies. And as Winston Churchill said, democracy is not perfect, but the others are worse, right? So I really think this is a kind of time when we are living, and how much can you make of India? In a 7,000-year-old civilization, it's only 67 years of a concept. If you count back 68 years, there was no concept like this at all. So if you count back another 100 years, well, will there be another concept like this? We do not know. We are the only geographical entity who was taken over not by an army, but by a company, which had 12 directors and 100 security guards. There was no war of Indian acquisition. So we are a funny entity at this point of time. We've been put together, and I really think, again, coming back to the same point, in realization of the potential of the geographical entity and the human equity that exists in the country, I think the way forward should be through positivism, creating more resources, creating more empathy, and thereby creating realistic values in the country. And if we do, if you feed people, if you alleviate the devastating poverty, the discrepancies in healthcare, education, and the rest of it, I think that forms the foundation of a true society, which no constitutions or no preambles can give to us. And I think we've done our bit. We've been part successes and part failures, and the baton goes over to you for the next round.
So I have two questions, to be precise. The first question being, Swamiji said that if you become a cobbler even, be the best cobbler. In today's world, we are facing a lot of competition. So being good and doing good to others has become farce. At least it seems to me sometimes. So how does Vivekananda's teaching come into play when competition amongst contemporaries come? And the second question is, that will be to Swamiji, that how do you think we can feel God?
We've been kind of like a DNA going through two strands of ideas. One strand of ideas has been around goodness, that we should be good, we should do good to others, and so on and so forth. There's a second strand of ideas which we have been speaking about, but not to the emphasis that is there, which is the Swamiji's idea of strength, where he said that first and foremost be strong, and then you'll have the capacity to retain your goodness. In fact, his own personal preference was towards strength first and goodness second. Now this has deep relevance to what you're saying, because first and foremost, I think competition, etc., it all comes from the idea that it actually means that you are dependent on judging yourself, evaluating yourself on somebody outside. It means that your own belief in your own infinite capacity, or your own sense of what you can be, or your own potential as a human being, your own sense of strength is what needs to be reinforced. So I think that the answer to the problem of competition does not lie in more or less competition, but more of you and more of the inner you. And if there's more of the inner you coming out, then competition will get dealt with either way. As long as you're viewing outside, in short, you're being outside in your thinking, then weakness is bound to hound you. And even your goodness will be a social goodness. It will be a socially constructed goodness. While if you are inside out, which is what Swamiji wanted us to be, then your goodness will also be an intrinsic goodness flowing out to people. And then that is something that will be sustainable and more permanent. I think this is
I think the question that you read on socio-economic and political road, as well as competition, is related. I'd like to put a needle to your compass. When you want growth, there's an inevitability with growth. You will have wealth. With wealth, you'll have greed. With greed, you'll have corruption. Because we are trying to place as the first thing in our goodies more money. So in this context, the compass needle should say, what do you understand by development? Is it becoming efficient? Is it catching up with the West? Or is it doing good for majority? And if your idea is competition at the cost of the majority being lost, then you've lost the whole game. But if the whole purpose of efficiency, growth, which is what some economists raise, what is the motive for growth? What is the motive for development? And I think Swamiji again comes in very clearly. It is to see that you uplift the lot which is with you. When you put that as your talisman, you will not have a problem, and you'll understand the whole socio-economic process is to uplift your brethren because they are part of you.
You know, Swamiji was big on entrepreneurship. So one of the reasons you're worried about competition, if you think of the Grameen Bank, if you think even of iPhone, if you think of the Walkman, you know, they were all trying to actually improve human existence and human life. And if you have a business plan and that fails in the competition, it's a good thing, because that means that you're not addressing a social need. So focus more on finding a social need and how you can go about addressing it and getting paid for it. So that is what I meant, that you have to think analytically, you have to think deeply. When you say that you're worried about competition, that means you're just worried about getting a job. You're not thinking enough about changing lives. Swamiji said, take one idea and make that your life. Just find one social need that you want to address. And just, you know, you're very young. Take some time, a few months and a year or two out of your life, and just, you know, rack your brains and find a solution for it. And you will see where you go.
Well, just have a comment on that. See, there are two evils which are plaguing our young people. One is competition, other is imitation. We also have been told when we were young, you be like your young. In every household there will be an elder brother who is very extraordinary, one Jethu and Mamu. And then they'll tell you, be like your uncle, be like your... I was also told. When I grew up, I asked myself, why should my brother not be like me? And why should I be like my brother? See, there is uniqueness in each one of you. Try to manifest that uniqueness and you will shine. Not by competition, because you are unique. The fundamental scientific principle to this is that in nature, every particle, every insect, every animal, every human being is unique. Those of you who are exposed to science, have you read the Pauli's exclusion principle? It says no two particles in the composition of an atom can be exactly identical with regard to all the quantum numbers. If two of them were, one of them will be excluded from the composition of the atom. So you are unique. Believe in this. This is scientific. It's not religion. It is not even philosophy. You are unique in this creation. And you have something to contribute. And therefore, you don't try to be like somebody else. Don't try to outwit somebody else in the name of competition. Now, there's so much of talk of excellence. There are two types of excellence. One is competitive excellence, with the companies practice. Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola. In the World Cup match long ago, there was a big competition. One of them won. So they invented a slogan, nothing official about it. And they won the game. So don't compete with anybody, compete with your own self. Which means you have an ideal before you and ask yourself how far behind I am with that ideal. Try to excel yourself so that you can reach the ideal. That is continuously competing with your own self. How far you are behind this ideal, that doesn't give you a bad taste. Competition involves aggression, jealousy. And this competitive excellence is no excellence at all. It will give you always sorrow. And therefore, if you realize that you are unique, which is the Atman principle, and try to realize it. In school, a school teacher wrote to us in a notebook, express whatever talents you have. The woods would be silent if no bird sang except those who sang best. A crow is not ashamed before a cuckoo. The cuckoo comes and sings so beautifully, crow, ka, ka. It is not ashamed. Nature has not given us. Unfortunately, the human beings, through education, we've been hopelessly spoiled. So I express what I have. I'm a crow. God has given me this. I will express happily. Express yourself happily and try to manifest this uniqueness within you, and you shall succeed. And don't imitate even Vivekananda. Vivekananda was extremely unhappy if you imitated him. Many of our monks say he is the role model. I slightly differed from them and said, Vivekananda would be very unhappy to be projected as a role model. You are your own role model. Swamiji said this. I tried to find an ideal everywhere until I realized I am my own ideal. You are your own ideal. Try to discover yourself and take the help of Swami Vivekananda as a facilitator. Use him and never imitate him. Swamiji said the last day of his life, never imitate me. Nobody can imitate anybody. You have to be your own self, for which introspection and try to find out what is your uniqueness. That is very necessary. So I think we have to close now. We have perhaps exceeded our time, extremely delighted that the panelists contributed so much and our young friends also poked them. And my special thanks to all of you who have sat through and listened to us speaking. And this is Vivekananda Anudhyan, meditating on Swami Vivekananda, not as a person, as a religious person or any other person, but as a great source of inspiration so that we can discover ourselves.